The cameras saw it before anyone else did. Long after the doors shut and the last of the Black Friday mob spilled back into the parking lot, Rivergate Mall kept breathing in the glow of its own security monitors. Grainy feeds blinked from empty food court tables, shuttered storefronts, the dark glass eyes of jewelry displays. Every screen should have shown the same thing: stillness. But at 2:13 a.m., one of the cameras in Corridor C caught movement. A woman in a puffy winter coat stepped out of the toy store, alone. No music, no closing announcements, no security guard, scritch. Just her, walking slowly down the center of the hallway with shopping bags still in her hands. Even though the store's lights were turned off behind her, the footage should have been impossible. The doors had been locked 3 hours earlier. On the screen, she staggered. One of the bags slipped from her grip. Her shoulders rolled under, the coat like something was wrong with the bones underneath. She didn't turn toward the exit signs. She didn't call for help. She just drifted down the hallway, head tilted back, like she was listening to a sound the microphones couldn't catch. Halfway to the central atrium, she stopped walking upright. Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. Her hands went to the floor first, the coat sleeves bent at angles that didn't belong on a human arm. The camera's resolution wasn't great, but you didn't need 4K to see the shape that kept going down the corridor wasn't standing on 2 legs anymore. The night guard on duty stared at the screen, hand hovering over the radio, mouth half open. He never made that call. That's what the police records say. Months later, no outgoing distress communication. The footage ends with his reflection in the glass, his wide eyes flicking sideways as something moves under the desk. They never released the rest of the tapes. They never talk about what crawled out from under Corridor C and into the dark. What? They do talk about the ones who quit after the weekend, the ones whose hands still shake when they pass a Mulhaz, a Mahaz, a Ma. A Mahaz. A Ma has a different name for that shift that comes after Black Friday. They don't call it cleanup. They call it the second wave. If you're smart, you don't volunteer for it. If you're desperate enough to say yes, you should at least hear how it went for the last guy. Stay with this one. Don't wander off when the lights start flickering. Stories like this don't just entertain you. Sometimes they warn you. The folks who listen all the way through, they're the ones who remember where to run when the doors lock behind them. You're listening to whispering narratives. Places like Rivergate don't whisper their legends to scare children. They whisper them so the survivors recognize each other. Now, let's go back to the night the second wave rolled in. Parker didn't even want the overtime. He was 26, broke, and 1 rent payment away from sleeping in the stockroom. That's what he told himself as he signed his name onto the roster. Saturday night, second wave shift. Every other associate he recognized had suddenly gotten sick. Had prior plans? Or refused? Absolutely not. I don't care if it's triple pay. He laughed them off. Then he'd worked Black Friday. He'd seen the worst, or he thought he had, when he showed up at Rivergate just before midnight. The parking lot looked like a crime scene after the bodies had been moved. Trash everywhere. Shopping carts stranded at odd angles. Stray receipts blowing across the asphalt like white leaves. The huge Black Friday event banner still hung over the main entrance, one corner torn loose and flapping in the cold wind. Inside, the air was different. Malls feel wrong when they're empty. Too many mirrors, too many glass fronts reflecting nothing. Parker's footsteps echoed off tile, past poster boards bragging about doorbusters and midnight madness. Somewhere deeper in the building, a floor buffer wind, and then cut off with a frustrated curse from the janitor riding it. Most of the crew were from other stores, drafted for the night. A pair of exhausted-looking teens from electronics, a middle-aged woman from housewares, a a guy from Shoes who hadn't stopped yawning. They clustered near the security desk while the manager droned through the checklist. Nobody looked at the cameras. If they had, they might have noticed Corridor C's feed was already a fraction darker than the others. Like the light back there wasn't keeping up. Like the hallway itself was learning how to breathe in silence. Parker did feel one thing, even before the shift really began. It slid along the back of his neck as the manager talked about restocking and folding and scanning returns. He felt watched, not from the doors, not from outside, from deeper in, somewhere in the dark, beyond the food court, beyond the toy store, where the last woman on the tape had walked, past the places you can see on a mall map. Some things had stayed after closing. Some of them were still deciding what shape they wanted to keep. If you're still here, keep listening. Don't mute this. Don't skip. You might recognize the sound the second wave makes before you see it. Asterisk, asterisk. The first 20 minutes felt almost normal. That's the trick the mall plays on your mind. Those long, glossy hallways turn into tunnels of routine. You fold a few shirts. You cut open some boxes. You tell yourself that dread is just exhaustion. Wearing a different mask, Parker parked himself at the men's apparel tables, straightening stacks of sweaters, picking at loose threads, trying not to yawn. The others fanned out to their assigned areas. The janitor's floor buffer returned to life, humming down the hall in slow circles. The air smelled like cardboard, stale perfumed samples, and the faint chemical bite of glass cleaner. But underneath all that was something else. A smell with no place in a more metallic, warm, slightly sweet, like blood on a radiator. He paused mid-fold, sweater hanging limp between his hands. "Stephanie," he called out to the housewares woman. "You smelled that?" She sniffed once, shrugged. "Probably the pipes. They're ancient." But the pipes didn't drip in patterns like footsteps. The sound came from the far end of apparel, just beyond the dim corridor leading to Corridor C, the one Parker had avoided looking at directly. Soft taps, slow, purposeful, like someone walking barefoot, heel-toed, heel-to-toed. He moved closer, narrowing his eyes. Nothing there. Just the hallway stretching on, lights flickering like a dying pulse. He returned to folding. Something thudded against the wall. He froze again. This time, Stephanie heard it too. Her head snapped toward the corridor, eyebrows tight. Someone else on shift? "No," Parker said. "Just us." It was supposed to be reassuring. It wasn't far off in the mall. A metallic crash echoed loud, enough to vibrate the racks. Every employee stopped what they were doing. That wasn't pipes. That wasn't floor buffing. That was something big. Another crash followed. Then something like a shelf tipping. A hollow, animalistic grunt, quickly muffled, as if swallowed by the dark. Parker's manager radioed security. "Renee, you back? There, everything okay in storage?" Static answered. Then a second voice. Not Reen's. Not human. A sound halfway between a breath and a warning growl. The manager turned pale. "We're grouping up. Everybody to the security desk now. Move." They began gathering, but the mall had its own plans. As Parker stepped away from his table, something caught his eyes. Something wrong with the abandoned sweater stacks. A thread hung loose from one of the sleeves. But the thread wasn't red, or white, or navy. It was brown, rough, and attached to a piece of fur snagged between the folded layers. He touched it, warm. The lights above the corridor flickered again, this time in rhythm, one by one, retreating into darkness like something was walking beneath them. He backed away quickly, sweater forgotten, pulse climbing in his ears. The janitor rolled up next to Parker on his sputtering buffer, chewing gum like he hated the flavor. You hear that crash? Something in storage went down hard. Could be The machine cut out again. Not due to a cord, not due to power. The janitor cursed and kicked the wheel. Stupid thing, a long, slow shadow bled across the wall. Beside them, stretched, bent, walked on all fours. The janitor's gum froze mid-chew. What the hell? But when they turned, nothing stood there. Just the lingering smell, metallic and warm. Something moved behind the slatted gate of the toy store. A shuffle, a scraping, a low whimper, then the unmistakable sound of claws against tile. Parker's heart hammered so loud he thought the others might hear it. "Hey, manager," said security desk. "Now." The janitor nodded and backed away. They both hurried toward the central atrium, but Rivergate never let people leave cleanly. The mall is a maze by design, a labyrinth of endless mirrored fronts and sound-bending corridors. And tonight, the air itself seemed to guide them wrong. The floor buffer, abandoned, rolled a few inches on its own like something had nudged it. Parker stole a glance back in the dim of corridor C. Something shifted behind a stack of promotional signage. Just enough motion to say, "I see you. Keep coming my way." He didn't. They reached the security desk in a tense cluster, everyone except Renee. The guard whose voice they'd heard twisted through the radio. The manager was shaking slightly as he locked eyes with Parker. "You were closest to corridor C. Did you see someone back there?" Parker swallowed. "How do you tell your boss you saw a shadow crawl, not walk?" "No," he said softly. "But something's moving." Silence fell heavy. The manager leaned toward the monitors, flipping through cams, more static than footage, more blackouts than feeds. 2 cameras were down entirely. On another, a chewed electrical cable swung from the ceiling like a vine. On the 4th monitor was corridor C light flickering, signs swaying, and something crouched halfway down the hall. Not a person, not anymore. A misshapen silhouette, limbs too long, shoulders hunched at impossible angles, breathing, waiting, facing the cameras like it already knew it was being watched. Stephanie covered her mouth. The janitor whispered, "Oh, hell no." And the manager, voice cracking, said the only 3 words Parker truly feared. "That's not human. If you're still listening, lean in. This is where the normal world tears open like cheap wrapping paper. This is where the second wave stops, pretending it's just a story." The manager's voice kept saying it. "That's not human." As if repeating it might make the thing on the monitor flicker away. It didn't. The shape in corridor C stayed perfectly still, except for the slow rise and fall of its shoulders. It was turned toward the camera, head dipped, as if it were sniffing the lens from 30 yards away. Light strobed over it in intermittent pulses. Fur where skin should be, a long arc where a spine should have ended, arms bent wrong, like the elbows had migrated. The janitor stepped closer to the monitor, pupils blown wide. "Zoom in," he whispered. "Go on, zoom in. I want to see what we're dealing with." The manager hesitated, then tapped the keyboard. The camera obeyed, the view pushed in, frame by frame. The grain fought the distance, barely holding the outline together. They saw hints, a longer jaw, glistening eyes catching the fluorescence, teeth when the thing's mouth parted slightly and then the feed cut to static. One sharp pop in the speakers, like a snarl punching through all the cables at once, and corridor C winked into snow. Something clanged in the distance, deep in the mall's gut. "Cameras don't just die like that," Stephanie muttered. "Not all at once." The janitor nodded slowly. "Not unless something's chewing on the wiring." The manager spun on them, putting on his customer service face like it could still matter. "Okay, everyone just calm down. It's probably an animal that got in, We'll stay together. Will the radio at his belt crackled. A voice slipped out, wet, gurgling, half-choked, like someone was talking around a mouthful of broken glass. Help me. Parker's spine turned to ice. Renee, the manager asked. Where are you? A breath, too close to the mic, a low, rattling growl beneath it, like air moving past teeth that weren't shaped for words anymore. See, corridor. See, a heavy thud cut the transmission, then a screech of metal. Then nothing. The mall hummed in the silence, pretending to be innocent. The manager's eyes shone with that particular corporate terror, the part of him calculating liability even as the human part wanted to run. Okay, he said. We go together. We see if he's hurt. If it's an intruder or an animal, we back away and call 911. And if it's that, Stephanie asked, pointing at the dead monitor. He didn't answer. They moved anyway. The small group left the safety of the desk and stepped back into the open throat of the mall. Every footstep echoed. Every shuttered storefront looked like a mouth waiting to open. Parker felt the cameras above them tracking their progress with dead eyes. The smell grew stronger as they approached Corridor C, not just blood now. Wet dog, iron, sweaty fur, the hot copper scent of breath that didn't belong indoors. Halfway down the main drag, the janitor leaned close to Parker and spoke out of the side of his mouth. You know what they called this shift last year? The ones before us? Parker shook his head. They called it the second wave. Said the first wave of shoppers wore the place down. The second wave is what followed them in. You believe that? Parker whispered back. I do, tonight. They turned into Corridor C. The change in temperature was immediate. Colder, but somehow thicker, like the air was fur you had to push through. The lights overhead flickered out every second fixture, creating a rhythm of light, dark that made it impossible to see more than a few yards clearly. Shelving units and cardboard displays leaned against the walls like they'd been shoved, not placed. Renee, the manager called. His voice didn't carry like it should have. The sound seemed to fall and die on the tile. If you can hear us, say something. Something answered, not language. A low, rolling snarl from deeper in the corridor, followed by a sound that curdled the back of Parker's mind. Bone grinding against bone, like someone forcibly rotating joints past their intended limits. They reached the entrance to the toy store. Its gate was still down, slatted metal strips laced together, but bent slightly outward on one side, as if something large and impatient had shouldered it. Darkness waited inside. Boxes scattered across the floor. A toppled display of stuffed animals stared up at them. Stitched smiles turned on their sides. Then one of the plush wolves twitched. Parker's breath hitched. His brain scrambled for rational explanations. A mouse, a draft, settling plastic. But the toy didn't just shift, but rolled, like something underneath it had pushed. He moved his flashlight beam toward it. Don't, the janitor said sharply. Just don't. The light slipped past the plush display and caught something else instead. A hand, Reen's hand. He thought at first until he saw the fingers. They were too long, the nails thickened into stubby claws, the skin stretched, shiny over new bone. The hand lay twisted on the tile just beyond the gate, attached to an arm that disappeared into the gloom. The arm was wearing Reen's uniform sleeve. The manager swore under his breath, stepping closer. Oh my God, Renee, can you the hand spasm ed dot, not a death twitch. A deliberate grip, clawed fingers raking against the tile, searching for purchase. The thing attached to that arm pulled itself a few inches further into the weak spill of corridor light. They saw shoulders half-wrapped in shredded uniform, a neck bent at a savage angle, a face caught mid-rear right, one eye still human, bloodshot and wild, the other glowing, yellow-gold, catching the fluorescence like a predator's. The jaw stretched with a sick, moist crack, teeth lengthened as they watched, gums shredding pink. Rene, or what was left of him, looked up at them from the floor. Run, he gargled, voice shredded around a throat that no longer matched the shape of human words. Then he screamed. The sound wasn't like anything Parker had heard a person make. It started as a scream, rose into a howl, then broke apart into something metallic and wolfish and wrong. His back arched, bones popped, the shredded sleeve tore completely as muscles bulged underneath, fur pushing through like a forest erupting after a fire. Back, the manager shouted. Everyone back, now. They stumbled away from the gate, inside the toy store. Reen's body convulsed and lengthened, limbs thudding against shelves, sending toys raining down in a storm of plastic and fuzz. Shadows on the walls warped into lupine outlines. Joints snapped into new sockets. Claws sparked against tile as he kicked free of the last human angles. Parker couldn't look away. It was the sort of horror that hijacks the part of your brain designed for car crashes and falling from heights. He had to watch, to remember, like his life depended on it. Maybe yours does, too, if you've ever worked a late shift and felt your skin crawl for no reason. If you've ever heard something moving in the stockroom when you were alone, listen now. Don't click away. The second wave doesn't start when the doors open. It starts when people like Rene stop being people. Something vast and newly built. Inside, that store slammed against the gate. The metal bowed outward with a screech. And for the first time that night, Parker realized the mall wasn't big enough to hold what was waking up. If you're still with them in that corridor, stay close. The first transformation has already begun. What comes next is what the second wave was made for. When you're ready, we'll go deeper into the lore, the curse, and the hunt that's about to spill out of that toy store. The gate finally stopped rattling, not because whatever was inside the toy store had calmed, but because it had realized something. A hunter doesn't waste energy on barriers once it understands the shape of its prey. Parker felt that truth ripple through the corridor like a cold current. The manager herded everyone back toward the security desk again, though none of them dared turn their backs fully on the toy store. A soft scrape followed them, metal brushing tile like claws dragging lazily behind. Don't run, Stephanie whispered. Running sets it off. How do you know that? The janitor hissed. She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the shadow under the gate, where something huge paced back and forth, breath steaming out between the bars in low fogs of heat. They reached the center atrium. Holiday decorations still hung from the ceiling, shimmering foil snowflakes and oversized ornaments. Beneath them, the empty mall looked like a cathedral abandoned mid-sermon. Phones, the manager said, voice trembling. Everyone call 911. Just do it, now. Parker pulled his outer with shaking hands. No signal. The others tried, swearing under their breath, stepping in circles, as if one step left or right might catch a stray bar. It's the building, the janitor muttered. Always been like that. No, Stephanie said softly. Not like this. She pointed toward the ceiling, above the holiday decor tucked between ductwork and support beams. Faint sigils were carved into the metal runes, or symbols etched long ago, illuminated only by the dying fluorescence. Parker had never noticed them before. Those weren't there yesterday, the manager said. Yes, Stephanie replied. They were. She stepped under the central skylight where moonlight bled through thick winter clouds. When my grandmother worked here, back when Rivergate first opened, she used to tell us kids a story. Her voice softened into a near whisper, not for theatrics, but because the mall itself seemed to punish loud noise. She said the mall was built on old land, trading land, gathering land, a place where crowds came together, not because of deals, but because something in the ground called them there. The janitor stared at her like she'd lost her mind, but Parker didn't look away. What does that have to do with the manager? Began. Black Friday, she said. Think about it. Every year, hundreds of people fight, push, bleed, scream. The frenzy draws energy. My grandmother said there's a first wave, the crowd, the chaos, the hysteria, but that wasn't what the land was ever hungry for. Another crash erupted behind them, deeper in the corridor. Then what was it hungry for? Parker asked. Stephanie met his eyes. The second wave, she said. The ones who stayed. The ones whose minds cracked first. The janitor shook his head in disbelief. Lady, you're saying the mall is cursed? I'm saying it's a feeding ground. A light above them exploded, showering tiny glass fragments. Something moved beyond the food court fast. Too fast for a human shape. A blur that darted between the shadows of kiosks. Parker's voice dropped. It's not just Renee. No, Stephanie said. It never is. She nodded toward the far end of the atrium. There, near the escalators, lay a trail of clothing, a jacket, then a shirt, then pants torn at the seams. Under the clothes, paw prints appeared in sticky smears across the tile. But they weren't just wolf prints. They were shifting human, heel impressions bleeding into claw marks, toes elongating, pads forming, the evolution frozen in the pattern like time-lapse. The manager backed away. We need to get to the exits now. Parker looked toward the main doors. Glass, steel, wide, clear a mistake. Something was pressed against the outside of the doors, a silhouette leaning forward, breath fogging the glass, claws lightly tapping as if deciding which pane to test. Another stood beside it, then a third, shapes gathering out of the snow-covered parking lot, eyes glowing faintly gold, pacing in the lamplit dark. That's impossible, the manager whispered. How did they followed the scent, Stephanie said. What scent? Parker asked. She hesitated, then. Yours. A heavy thud shook them all, not from the toy store this time, but from deeper down the west wing. Another, steady, heavy, rhythmic. The janitor's face drained. That's footsteps. Big ones. No, Parker murmured. That's hunting gait. He didn't know how he knew that, but something inside him had recognized the pattern. A predator circling its territory, herding prey into a center point. The manager snapped. I'm not staying here. We're getting to the emergency exit behind appliances. He didn't finish. A scream ripped across the mall from the children's clothing section. A high, ragged shriek, cut off in the middle like something had bitten clean through the breath that made it. The gate behind them buckled. The toy store creature had chosen, and it wasn't alone anymore. If you're still listening, don't look away. This is the moment the curse reveals its mouth. This is the truth Rivergate was built to hide. Something in the toy store roared, not the rapid, tearing sound of a predator mid-kill, no. This was worse. It was becoming a long, body-deep sound that vibrated against the tile and up the walls, rattling the holiday ornaments overhead. It shook loose flakes of fake snow. Somewhere in the mall's ductwork, something skittered fast, following the vibration like it was a hunting call. The gate bowed outward, metal screamed, the slats warped, cracking at the hinges. Then it burst. A shape exploded from the toy store in a shower of twisted metal. Shelving toppled behind it, toys spilling like bright entrails. Lights flickered down the corridor like a wave of dying stars. Parker didn't get a clean look at Renee, what Renee had become. A blur of bent limbs and fur and teeth whipping into the corridor at impossible speed. The manager screamed for everyone to run. They ran. Shoes slapped tile, breath tore open lungs. The mall shifted around them, echoing everything, amplifying panic like it was food. The janitor threw himself behind the housewares counter. Stephanie dove behind a kiosk. Parker and the manager sprinted toward appliances, the emergency exit somewhere behind the stockroom. But the mall wasn't a quiet place anymore. Something else moved with them, shadows, slipping between shadows. A thud on skylight glass above. A scrape of claws on railing. A quick patter behind the candy kiosk. Parker knew a pack when he heard one. Even if he'd never faced anything like this. "Keep going," the manager shouted, nearly tripping on a fallen display. "Don't look back." Parker didn't want to, but the sound made him. A snarl ripped through the air so close it tickled his spine. He spun. A figure came tearing out of the darkness, sprinting on all fours, reins, uniform shredded to ribbons, fur bristling black and grey, jaw hinged wide like it had forgotten human limits. His eyes were wrong, one yellow with lupine vertical pupils, the other still faintly human, bloodshot and drowning in terror. He was suffering. He was hunting. He no longer knew which was which. "Move," Parker yelled. They dodged as Renee lunged, skidding across tiles so hard that sparks kicked up. He crashed into a mall bench, splintering wood. The impact didn't slow him. He rose, back arching, shoulder blades tearing higher through skin, fingers clicking into longer, hooked claws. His howl tore through the escalators and bounced off glass cases. The howl wasn't alone. 3 others answered, one from the food court, one from upstairs near electronics, one from the main entrance where the silhouettes had been, pressed against the glass. The pack had entered the building. They reached the back hallway behind appliances. A narrow corridor lit with stuttering fluorescence. A buzzing exit sign glowed ahead like salvation. "We're almost there," the manager gasped, fumbling with a crash bar. Behind them, claws scraped tile, the slow, confident rhythm of something that knew fear made prey clumsy. The door refused to open. "What?" the manager whispered. No, this isn't locked." "This can't be locked," he shoved. The bar didn't budge. Parker saw it first carved into the metal of the door, etched deep enough to expose raw steel, was a symbol, one of the runes from the ceiling. The mall didn't want them leaving. "This is impossible," the manager said, voice cracking. This can't be real." Something hot breathed down their necks. Parker grabbed the manager and pulled him back moments before a clawed hand slammed where his head had been. The creature's arm jammed through the air like a spear, tearing into drywall behind them. Renee, no what, used to be Renee. The creature dragged its claws back slowly, savoring the scrape, savoring their fear. The manager bolted the only direction left, deeper into the back hallway. Parker followed, adrenaline flooding every nerve. Behind them, Renee crawled along the walls, body contorted like a spider, limbs scuttling in ways bones shouldn't allow. His jaws clicked open and shut in anticipation. Twice he lunged, twice he missed by inches. The hallway dead-ended at a stockroom door. They slipped inside, slamming it behind them as claws sank into the opposite side, rattling the hinges. Parker shoved heavy boxes against the door. The manager added a dolly, a stack of microwaves, anything he could drag. The pounding stopped. Silence, silence, is never a gift in a place built on fear. The manager leaned back against the boxes, trembling. I didn't sign up for this. I'm not dying in a mall." He was unraveling, and Parker knew what came next, because he'd seen it earlier that night in the corridor. The runes. The frenzy, the way this place consumed emotion. "Hey," Parker said softly. "Look at me." But the manager's hands were shaking violently. He rubbed his forehead, fast, panicked, clawing at the sweat. And Parker froze, because under the manager's skin, something moved. A tremor, a ripple, then a crack. The manager screamed, doubling over as his spine jolted beneath his shirt, vertebrae popping like firecrackers. His fingers locked into claws. His shoulders bulged, the fabric tearing as his bones rearranged themselves from the inside out. "No note," he sobbed. I didn't get bitten. Renee hadn't been bitten either. Neither had the shoppers. It wasn't an infection. It was a trigger. A pull. A call to something ancient inside the human body. Something dormant until frenzied blood and moonlight lined up just right. The manager collapsed, writhing, skin mottling, teeth lengthening with wet clicks. His last human word was Parker's name. Then the growl began. Low, hungry, full of recognition. If you're listening, you know this is where the night stops, pretending you have choices. The hunt has begun. The manager wasn't human anymore. Parker watched helplessly as the man convulsed across the stockroom floor, his body rewriting itself in brutal, jerking increments. Bones cracked sharp against concrete, muscles twitched and bulged impulses, swelling like they were being inflated under his skin. His clothes tore in loud, ripping bursts. And through it all, his eyes weren't human. One turning gold never left Parker. He saw recognition dissolve, then hunger grow in its place. The creature that used to be his boss rose on new limbs, shoulders rolling like a predator testing its range. Saliva dripped from jaws that hadn't existed minutes ago. He flexed his new claws, scraping deep grooves into the tile. The door behind them shuddered. Renee was still out there, scratching, sniffing, pacing. They were cornered between two monsters. With the mall ceiling, every exit like it had learned how to tighten its own ribs. "Stay back," Parker whispered. It was stupid nothing in that room was listening to human words anymore. The manager thing lunged. Parker ducked behind the shelving, heart slamming so hard he thought it might explode. The creature crashed into the boxes, sending microwaves skidding and tumbling like metal dice across the floor. It snarled, head whipping side to side, tracking scent, breath fogging in thick bursts. Another blow rattled the door. Renee pushing harder. Parker heard Stephanie's scream echo faintly through the mall, one long, terrified cry swallowed by distance. He had seconds to choose. Run out into the open, where the pack waited, or stay here and die between two turning wolves. The manager creature panted, low and hot, inches from Parker's hiding place. Parker grabbed the only thing nearby with any waiter, thick metal pricing gun, and hurled it at the emergency sprinkler, pipe overhead. The metal hit the pipe with a clang. Cold water exploded downward. The creature shrieked, recoiling as the icy spray splashed across its half-formed skin. It wasn't Burnett, it was disorientation, confusion. Its senses were hypersensitive during the shift. Anything jarring scrambled it. Reneve howled outside the door, answering the cry. Parker seized the window. He shoved aside boxes, bolted toward the back wall, and slammed his shoulder into the maintenance door, one he'd never noticed before, because the stockroom shelves usually blocked it. It cracked open. He fell through into a service hallway, slamming it shut behind him. Darkness swallowed him only. A thin red emergency light glowed down the corridor, pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm almost like a heartbeat. Parker ran out his footsteps, echoed in the empty artery of the mall. Pipes overhead throbbed with the building's old, ancient rhythm. Somewhere above him, Claws skittered along ductwork. Something paced him from the ceiling. Another howl ripped through the mall. This one, deeper, bigger. Not Renee, not the manager. Another had changed. Parker stumbled as he ran, breath tearing through him like razors. His legs felt weak, his eyes burned. His pulse hammered so fast it felt like it might burst. He didn't understand it until he saw his reflection in the metal panel. At the end of the corridor, his pupils were narrowing, just slightly. Barely there, but unmistakable. "No," he whispered. "No, not me." The mall hummed in response. He wasn't turning, but something inside him was waking up, vibrating under his skin like a trapped animal rattling its cage. He reached the end of the service hall, kicked open the door and found himself in the food court, illuminated only by moonlight pouring down through the skylights. Half-eaten leftovers littered the tables. Chairs were overturned, a soda machine hissed in the corner, and 3 silhouettes moved among the tables. Slow, confident, sniffing the air, they turned toward him in unison. Their eyes glowed in the moonlight. Yellow, gold, amber, different shades but all predatory. One stood upright, still halfway human, ribs stretching beneath torn skin. Another crouched low, fur bristling along its spine. The third was almost fully wolf-like, but wrong too big, too long-limbed. Every movement, a contortion. Parker backed away. A soft whisper reached his ear. "You don't run from the second wave. You rise with it." His blood iced. He spun. Stephanie stood behind him, but not the Stephanie he knew. Her eyes glowed a soft, molten gold. Her fingers were longer, tipped with emerging claws. Her breath fogged the air like something burning its way out of her lungs. And yet she wasn't attacking. She wasn't hunting. She was suffering. "I tried to warn you," she said, voice cracking as something shifted beneath her skin. I tried to resist it. But when the frenzy starts, when the mall calls, it chooses the ones who feel too much." Her spine arched, popping loudly. She gritted her teeth, fighting it. Parker stepped back, horrified. "No, Stephen. You're not like them?" "I'm not," she whispered. "Not yet, but I hear them. I hear what they want." "What do they want?" Her head jerked toward the skylight as the moon slid out from behind clouds, glowing blood red through a veil of ice crystals. "They want the pack," she murmured. "All of it. All of us." Her knees buckled. She dropped to her hands. Fur rippled across her shoulders in dark, trembling waves. The 3 creatures in the food court snarled eagerly, circling, waiting for her to join. She choked out one last human sentence. "Run. Before I stop trying to save you." Then she screamed as the transformation took her fully, her jaws splitting, eyes flooding gold, nails growing into curved obsidian hooks. The pack surged as one. Parker ran, each footstep echoing the truth pounding. In his skull, this wasn't a mall anymore. It wasn't a building. It wasn't a curse. It was a nest, and he was the last human thing inside it. Parker didn't remember the first 30 seconds after he ran. Fear reshaped the world into fragments. The slap of his shoes against tile, the deafening chorus of claws behind him, the moonlight flickering overhead through skylights like a pulsing heartbeat. The mall was a labyrinth, but prey learns paths fast. His body took turns before his mind caught up, left past the food court, right into the central atrium. Down the ramp toward management offices. Behind him, howls crashed together 5, maybe 6 voices, now luring into a sound so thick and primal it felt like it pushed him forward. He reached a service corridor he'd never used. A stretch carved from old concrete and older intentions. Emergency lights strobed just enough to paint his shadow on the walls. And then silence. The howls cut off. The claws stopped clattering. The mall inhaled. Parker pressed himself against the corridor wall and waited, chest heaving, sweat chilling down his back. Something soft drifted down from the ceiling. He caught it without thinking. A single tuft of fur, dark grey, warm, still alive with body heat. His breath caught. He wasn't alone in the corridor. A shape crouched at the far end, too still to be human, too patient to be a frenzied beast. Its eyes glowed like coals tucked into sockets. Its outline was massive, almost blending into darkness, except for where the emergency strobes caught the tips of its claws. It watched him, measured him, tilted its head, then it stepped aside. The floor vibrated behind it, more silhouettes joined. Some half-shifted, some fully lupin, some still wearing scraps of human clothing. They lined up behind the largest one, the leader, or whatever role the creature at the front had chosen tonight. They weren't chasing him. They were waiting. Colin Parker staggered backward, heart pounding in his ears. No, I'm not. His voice faltered, because the longer he stared into their eyes, the more he felt it. A trembling under his skin, a heat spreading from his spine, a pressure building behind his teeth and nails. The moonlight was doing something to him. No, the mall was doing something to him. The pack parted, creating a narrow path. The Alpha lowered its head, breath steaming in the cold air, and let out a soft rumble-an invitation. Something inside Parker tugged toward it, rooting through his ribs, hollowing out the fear and replacing it with something older. His knees buckled. He gripped the metal railing beside him, knuckles whitening, fighting the tremor creeping up his arms. "Not me," he whispered. I didn't join the rush. I didn't fight over anything. I didn't." The mall lights flickered. Every display, every sign, every abandoned storefront window, all of them caught the moonlight at once and reflected it back toward him like dozens of watching eyes. He saw his reflection in one of them. His pupils were elongated, not fully, just enough to hint at the shape beneath. A retching sob tore up his throat. The Alpha stepped closer. Its breath washed over him hot, metallic, familiar in a way he didn't want to name. It leaned its massive head in, sniffing his, neck long and slow. Parker's skin prickled, muscles tightening, body trembling like a tuning fork struck by an unseen hand. Then the Alpha growled, not aggressive, not hungry, acknowledging, accepting, not choosing. Parker felt something break inside him, not a bone, not a muscle. A direction. His body leaned forward without permission, breath sinking with the pack's low rumble. His fingertips grazed the tile, as if wanting to curl. He tore himself backward with a ragged cry, slamming against the wall. "No, I'm not part of this boot." Not a new sound cut through the corridor. Boots, human boots. A flashlight beam sliced through the dark, catching Parker square in the face. "Parker Reynolds," a voice called. "Step away from them." A man in a dark red coat stormed into view, flanked by two others. Their coats were marked with a symbol Parker recognized only from folklore. A lantern with a slash through its flame. Stephanie had mentioned them. The Red Lantern Order. "Get behind us," the leader barked. The pack snarled. The Alpha stepped forward. The corridor vibrated like a living throat, preparing to swallow. The Red Lantern hunters raised silvered weapons, not flashy, not Hollywood. Tools made for one purpose. Tools that had tasted fur before. A standoff. The hunters, the pack. Parker trembling between them, half called by one side, half saved by the other. The Alpha's eyes locked onto Parker one last time. In that look, he saw a truth that froze him deeper than any cold. The second wave wasn't meant to kill him. It was meant to recruit him. And just before the hunters opened fire, just before silver flashed, just before the corridor erupted into chaos, Parker felt his spine crack. Just once. Just a warning, not a transformation. A promise. Asterisk, if you're still here, the night hasn't finished with you either. Stories like this don't end just because the sun rises. They echo in your bones. They wait in the places you shop, the doors you push open, the crowds you squeeze through. Ask anyone who worked a Black Friday shift. Ask them what they saw after closing. Watch how they look at the floor before answering. And if something in your reflection ever looks back at you with gold in its eyes, run. If this story left a mark on you, whisper something below. A word, a warning, a sound you heard once when the lights flickered. Someone else might need it before the next sale, or the next moon. And above all, subscribe before the next full moon. Some stories only come for those who know how to listen.